Becoming paralyzed from the waist down is the end, haha. In line with her husband's cold words, my mother-in-law, Anne, also chimed in. To think you'd become disabled, it's a disgrace to the family. She confronted my beloved brother-in-law, Matthew, whom I had once adored, with these words. I am Lily, living with my husband, Josh. We both work, but Josh never helps with any household chores. I was constantly overwhelmed, juggling work and housework. On top of that, we live in an apartment, just a few minutes away from my in-laws' house, and Anne often called me over, causing further troubles. In essence, Anne only saw me as a maid, and burdened me with her personal care. At times, she even called me like a taxi substitute. I'm going shopping, give me a ride. She would say such things. Anne, who loved shopping, would go out here and there, buying things she liked. I couldn't help but wonder where the money was coming from. Since Anne didn't have a job, I assumed that my husband's brother, Matthew, who lived with us, was providing the money, but he never seemed to get involved. Anne always boasted about Matthew, saying, Matthew is such a kind and capable boy. I'm proud of him for graduating from a prestigious university and landing a job at a top-tier company. She would tell me such stories too. On the other hand, my husband, who is the second son, seemed to receive harsh treatment from Anne. No matter what Josh does, he's always mediocre. His school grades can't compare to Matthew's, and the company he works for is third-rate. On top of that, his wife is ugly and clueless. She always compared him to my Matthew. With my husband right there, hearing such things, he looked pained, and I felt anger towards Anne. It was true that my Matthew, unlike Anne, was gentle, had a good demeanor, and I couldn't help but wonder why Anne had such a mean personality. My husband was also working hard to earn Anne's approval, but her evaluation of him remained unchanged. Then an event occurred that completely transformed the situation between the two brothers. Matthew got into a car accident and became paralyzed from the waist down, leading to a life confined to a wheelchair. I thought Anne, who doted on my Matthew, would be shocked, but she surprised me with her cold attitude. Lily, you take care of Matthew. I'm old, so I can't do any caregiving. She burdened me with the care of my Matthew. While my Matthew wasn't completely bedridden, he couldn't move without a wheelchair, and it seemed challenging for him to handle the wheelchair alone. As I couldn't take care of my Matthew while working, I said to my husband, I can't do caregiving all by myself. In response, he coldly replied, I got it. We'll hire a helper, so stop complaining. He also adopted a cold attitude towards me. Furthermore, Anne even said, to think Matthew would become disabled. It's a disgrace to the family. She uttered such cruel words, and I was shocked by her sudden change in behavior. She used to boast about my Matthew all the time, but now she treated him as an annoyance. My husband joined in as well. No matter how prestigious the university you graduate from or how well you work for a top-tier company, if he become paralyzed from the waist down, it's all over. He said it as if mocking Matthew. From my husband's perspective, he might be happy to see my Matthew, who was always compared to him, fall from grace. However, Matthew didn't do anything wrong. He simply became paralyzed from the waist down due to an unforeseen accident. I felt as if my husband was rubbing his unpleasant side in my face, and it made me sad. I believed that Matthew was the one suffering the most, so I tried to take care of him in between work by visiting my in-laws' house. However, Anne didn't do anything herself and only made snide remarks. Lily, make sure you take care of Matthew properly. That's why you're a wife. She kept saying such sarcastic comments. I was getting angry at her words, but Matthew always expressed gratitude. Lily, I'm really grateful to you. Normally, it should be Mom and Josh taking care of me, not you. I'm sorry for causing trouble to someone like you. Although I was his sister-in-law, not a stranger, he didn't need to worry so much. But Anne's lack of empathy scared me. Lately, it seemed like she was taking care of my husband instead of Matthew. As expected, Josh is the most filial. A son who causes worry to his parents is the worst. I was amazed by her quick change of attitude. My husband, too, seemed happy to have gained Anne's approval. If I can't rely on others to take care of me, my life would be over. Health comes first in everything. He spoke as if he had won. As for me, even if I wasn't approved by Anne, I used to love my husband when he was working hard. But now, I feel empty. I disliked their words. But more than that, I have been accumulating dissatisfaction towards Anne and husband who do nothing to take care of my Matthew. While I'm at work, a caregiver takes care of my Matthew, but on my days off, I spend the whole day taking care of him at my in-laws' house. I used to visit my in-laws' house after work on weekdays to check on my Matthew, and Anne noticed me and said, "Lily, you must be going through a lot. Just think of it as fate and do your best." She said it as if it were someone else's problem, and I almost lost my temper. Upon hearing Anne's words, Matthew said, "I'm sorry for my mother's rude remarks. I don't know why she has such a terrible personality. It's embarrassing as her son." He apologized, but it seemed like Matthew was more hurt by Anne's words than I was. Since my Matthew's accident, I've been busy and haven't had much time to talk to my husband, but suddenly, he brought up the topic of a trip. "How about going on a trip to Hawaii with us and Mom? I feel sorry for inconveniencing you, with your brother's care." He's suddenly talking about a trip, and it surprised me even more that it was to Hawaii. But the first thing that came to my mind was my Matthew, so I immediately refused. I can't leave my brother alone. I immediately rejected it. My husband seemed to anticipate my response. "We'll ask the caregiver to take care of him, so it'll be fine. Besides, you need a break sometimes, or you'll end up getting sick." He spoke words of concern for me, considering the fatigue and stress I had accumulated from work and taking care of Matthew. I wanted a change of scenery. I was grateful for my husband's unusual consideration, but I still couldn't fully accept the idea of leaving Matthew behind. The next day, when I went to take care of Matthew, I gathered my courage and brought up the topic of the trip. "I have a discussion about going on a trip with your mother and Josh. Are you going to be okay?" Matthew showed no signs of surprise or astonishment. "I'll be fine. I always rely on you for hospital visits and errands, so go and enjoy yourself once in a while." He responded without any surprise, even encouraging me to go on the trip. With his support, I made up my mind to go on the trip. "I might end up being worn out by your mother and Josh, even on the trip." I said it half-jokingly. Matthew seemed to understand and burst into laughter. After that, I agreed to the trip with my husband. My husband immediately ordered me to plan and set the itinerary for the trip, and insisted on confirming it with Anne. I disliked contacting Anne the most, but there was no choice. I confirmed Anne's preferences and made the travel plans accordingly. However, Anne kept changing the schedule, and each time, I had to coordinate with the travel agency, adding unnecessary work. Despite saying, I might end up being worn out, in front of my Matthew, I was already exhausted even before the trip started. We managed to finalize the schedule 2 weeks before the departure, but now I had to help Anne with her travel preparations, adding to my fatigue. In addition to taking care of Matthew, I had to act as a driver because Anne insisted on buying everything necessary for the trip. As I watched Anne buying things unrelated to the trip, I couldn't help but feel amazed. "What are you daydreaming about? Hurry up and carry the luggage." Anne started yelling. She even ordered me to pack the luggage into the travel bag. Being treated this way, I had initially planned to relax on my own once we arrived in Hawaii, but that plan turned out to be just a dream. On the day of departure, my husband loaded only his and Anne's luggage into the car. "You're responsible for taking care of your brother. Since it will also cost money for the trip, you'll be staying home after all." He said it with a smirk on his face. And Anne said, "Hiring a helper would cost money. You're always taking care of Matthew, so it's only fair that you stay home during times like this. Besides, it won't cost anything if I ask you," Anne said, laughing merrily, and I lost the energy to get angry. It seemed like their plan all along was to leave me behind, making me handle the troublesome tasks such as coordinating with the travel agency and making reservations, while they went on the trip by themselves. If I thought about it carefully, there was no way Anne who saw me only as a maid, would take me on a trip to Hawaii. I had gotten carried away with the idea of going on the trip, and failed to see through Anne's and husband's scheme. I went to my in-laws' house as usual to take care of my Matthew. Wait, today was supposed to be the start of the trip. Matthew was surprised when I told him that Anne and husband had left me behind. I was the one who suggested the Hawaii trip. Since you're always doing so much for Lily, I wanted her to have a change of pace by going to Hawaii or something. That's why I even paid for the travel expenses. In retrospect, I found it strange when my husband suddenly mentioned the Hawaii trip. But after hearing my Matthew's explanation, it all made sense. Matthew apologized, seeing the exasperated look on my face. "I'm sorry for making you feel bad, Lily," I replied with a wry smile. "It really does make you feel terrible, doesn't it?" Suddenly, Matthew lowered his head and stood up from the bed. Seeing my surprise, Matthew said the following: "I may not be able to walk like before, but thanks to rehabilitation, I can walk a little now." He said it with a laugh. However, Matthew quickly turned serious and said, "From now on, I plan to live on my own. But before that, I want to get back at my mother and Josh. Will you join me, Lily?" He proposed to me. Naturally, I decided to participate in Matthew's plan. It seemed that Matthew had been considering moving out of the in-laws' house, even before the accident. He wanted to distance himself from his mother, who always interfered with his life. When he mentioned leaving the house to his mother, she started crying and pleading, saying she couldn't live alone and didn't have the means to support herself. He had considered forcefully leaving the in-laws' house, but then he thought it would lead to Anne asking us, as a couple, to live with him or demanding money, which would cause trouble. However, after the accident, seeing how his mother and husband treated him coldly, he felt the urge to retaliate against them. Matthew told me the detailed plan of how to get back at the two of them, and we immediately put it into action. Unaware of anything, my husband and mother-in-law returned home after their one-week trip to Hawaii. As soon as my husband arrived home, I received a phone call. "The apartment is empty. What do you mean by this? What about my belongings?" he shouted in panic. "I sent your belongings to your parents' house," I explained, and my husband muttered something incoherent. "I can't live with you anymore. I want a divorce." I made it clear. "Don't say such selfish things. I'm not getting a divorce." My husband became angry. I chuckled and said, "Who's being selfish here? I know you withdrew money from my account without my knowledge. I'm sure you gave it to your dear mother, didn't you? It's my money, so I will definitely have it returned." When I confronted my husband about giving money to his mother, he fell silent for a moment. After a while, he asked, "Where are you right now? Have you already moved out?" He tried to change the subject, not wanting to return the money. "I'm enjoying my new life." "Oh, and your brother also said he's moving out of his parents' house to live on his own, so I don't have to take care of him anymore, right?" Seemingly unable to grasp the unexpected turn of events, my husband fell silent. "I've sent the divorce papers along with your belongings to your parents' house. Sign them and submit them to the municipality. I don't want to have any more contact with you or your mother, so please submit them as soon as possible." I conveyed only the necessary information and ended the call. A few days later, my husband called me. "I submitted the divorce papers today. Thanks to you and your annoying brother with a disability, I can finally breathe easily." He made a sarcastic remark, so I responded, "You seem unaware, but your mother has a huge debt. Your brother informed me about it. Well, good luck repaying it together. Enjoy." I informed him of the truth and then hung up the phone, leaving my husband speechless. 1 month later, the lawyer I had hired to handle the repayment of the money my husband had taken from my account brought a letter from him. In the letter, my husband explained that he had used up all his savings to repay his mother's debt, and had even sold their family home, but it was still not enough. While I was relieved that my money was returned promptly, Anne's debt still remained, making it impossible for me to live with her. The letter also mentioned requests for reconciliation and getting back together. In the end, Anne went through bankruptcy proceedings, and my husband and her now live in a rundown apartment. However, in order to cover their living expenses, they continue to accumulate more debt, trapped in a never-ending cycle. Anne is still desperately trying to find out where Matthew went and even approached me, but I have no intention of telling her. Matthew, on the other hand, received compensation and disability pension from the accident, and rented a house in a distant place. He continues his rehabilitation while working remotely. As for myself, I started living alone, free from the interference of my husband and Anne, and I'm enjoying a peaceful life. The revenge plan Matthew and I devised against my husband and mother-in-law has worked out so well, and it brings me a sense of relief and satisfaction.